Today on the Brisbane Property Podcast, Melinda and I are talking all about 2032 Olympics.
We are going to be unpacking the Brisbane infrastructure venues, but also what is the likely impact going to be on the immediate surrounding regions in terms of residential property. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Welcome to the Brisbane Property Podcast with your hosts Melinda and Scott Jennison.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Brisbane Property Podcast with Scott and Melinda Jennison. And today we're talking things all Olympics.
We certainly are, and it is an exciting time for Brisbane. Today we are going to be talking about the Olympic venues that have been announced, but most people know about what venues are going where. We're going to break that down to talk about what might that mean for the local property market in these areas, what's actually happening in those areas right now, and what could change over the years to come.
So it was only a little while ago the Premier, David Crisafulli, announced the locations for the recommended venues set up for the 2032 Summer Olympic Games here and the Paralympic Games in Brisbane. Obviously, for Australia, it's the third time we're hosting the Olympics since Melbourne in 1956 and obviously Sydney in 2000. So it's exciting times. Obviously, us Brisbaneites, very excited by it. And I think everyone around Australia jump on board. I think it's a really good opportunity. Very, very different the way Brisbane will operate and be set up compared to especially Sydney, where they built out at Homebush Bay and built the Olympic setup out there, whereas in Brisbane, a lot of the venues and the setup is going to be around the CBD.
Yes, this is what makes the Brisbane Olympic Games in 2032 quite different to what we have experienced in the past, especially in Sydney. As you mentioned, Homebush was built as a purpose-built facility for hosting the games. Here in Brisbane, they are building the infrastructure in and around the CBD with all of the major venues located within that 5-kilometre radius. This is a Olympic Games like no other modern Olympic Games because most of them have been built in precincts well outside of the CBD. So a lot of people talk about, will the Olympic Games cause a change in property values? Let's look back at what happened to Sydney. Let's look at what happened to London. Let's look at what happened to all of these other major cities that have hosted Olympic Games. Well, the reality is what's happening here in Brisbane is actually going to be quite different. So whilst we can draw experiences from the past, it's not necessarily a reflection of what's likely to happen here for our Olympic Games in our city, because what we are creating is something quite unique given where the venues are being built and the infrastructure around those venues and who that's likely to benefit the most over the long term.
Yeah, and I think, look, it's great because it leaves a legacy. They talk about leaving a legacy after Olympic Games. I mean, when we've been down to Olympic Park in Sydney, I remember when I lived down there quite a while ago now, it feels, when Homebush first started, and when it started off, there was a hockey setup out there, I think with the netball where the basketball played. That was pretty much it at the very beginning. Now when you go down there, Olympic Park has not just all the sporting setup and the train station, but it's the showground moved out there. They've got the restaurants, the office buildings. There's a whole residential areas, towers. So it has changed that area considerably. Brisbane, obviously, when you look at the proximity to the CBD and what we've got at the moment, so we've got Suncorp Stadium, we've got the Gabba at the moment, which will be used for part of the Olympics, which we'll go through. But then when you add these other things in and upgrade what we've got existing, it's going to make it quite amazing. Obviously, public transport, walkable around the areas and different areas. So across the South Bank, which is existing, where we've got the convention centre and things like that as well. So utilising what we've got now, upgrading and obviously adding some new venues in, I think is an exciting time for Brisbane.
It certainly is. So we're going to talk about where the main venues are being located, and then we're going to talk about the suburbs that are on the fringe or beside or within these regions, what they look like from a density perspective, what they're likely to look like in the future off the back of these announcements, and what investors need to be aware of if they are considering purchasing off the back of some of these major announcements that have taken place.
So if we start in Victoria Park, obviously the Victoria Park was going to be the Victoria Park Stadium, 63,000 seat venue for the opening, closing and the athletics. Obviously a lot of major events will happen there. Eventually after the games, you'll find that the Lions and the Queensland Cricket will relocate from the Gabba across to Victoria Park. just across the inner city bypass in this same little precinct area where you've got the National Aquatic Centre. So currently we've got Centenary Pool there. They're going to be building a 25,000 seat venue. That will change a little bit. Obviously, for the Olympics, you'll have the larger seating and it'll adapt down to smaller. Obviously, in those areas, you'll have the swimming, the diving, the water polo, and the artistic swimming. So very good legacies for the area. But when you look at that location, and we talk about locations then around this area, close proximity. So in that area, RBH, so Royal Brisbane Women's Hospital, medical universities facilities, QUT University just up the road, and obviously the public transport. So access for the inner city bypass for cars, you've got trains, and you've also got the Metro line running through there as well.
That's right. So if we think about Hurston as a precinct, right now Victoria Park is public parkland. This was an area that was an 18-hole golf course. It was reduced to a driving range only more recently, and the rest of the parkland was opened up for public use. Look, it's an area that's close to where we live. I run through the area frequently on my morning runs, and you are on the fringe of the Brisbane CBD, and in elevated parts of this parkland, you do have amazing views also of the CBD. Now, once the stadium is built, what is this likely to mean for the surrounding locations? Now, Hurston as a suburb, which will sit just to the north of Victoria Park, it's quite a small suburb here in Brisbane. The dominant demographic are professional couples. A lot of them actually work in the health precinct at Hurston, being the Royal Brisbane Hospital region. The majority of the land in Hurston is zoned as either character residential land or low to medium density residential land. What this means is that character residential land that exists in conjunction with a character overlay, you will have a pre-1945 Queenslander house sitting on a single lot. Low to medium density residential land typically means you'll have either a character residential house that may also have a character overlay, meaning it's protected from demolition, or at some stage in the past, it may have been replaced with 2 to 3 story units or townhouses in and around the existing character housing. That is the housing type that exists in Hurston currently right now. And based on current land zoning, there's very little supply that can come to this particular region. What's interesting, I don't often like pinpointing suburbs. I don't often like talking about my hot, my suburb list or my hot picks for which areas are primed for the most growth. But about 9 to 10 months ago, I was asked to put forward my top 3 picks for realestate.com.au, and they recorded a project that is still available online. My number 1 pick for Brisbane in terms of a suburb at that time was Hurston, not because of the Olympic Games infrastructure that was at that time not earmarked for that location, but because Hurston as a location is just 2 kilometres to the north of the CBD. It has a limitation of future supply because of what I've just explained in terms of zoning and character overlays and pre-war homes that are protected from demolition. But more so than that, the median values for both houses and units in this market are significantly lower than a lot of the surrounding regions that sit around Hurston. You can go further to the north of the Brisbane CBD and the median values are a lot higher than what they are in Hurston as a pocket. Now, I will say Hurston is also a suburb that does have flood impact off the back of Enoggera Creek, which does burst its riverbanks from time to time, or creek banks from time to time. There are low-lying areas in Hurston that absolutely are flood impacted, but there are other elevated locations in Hurston that definitely don't have any flood impact. Already, anecdotally, we are hearing from selling agents that sellers that they were talking to previously have already decided they're not selling off the back of this Olympic announcement. So now the supply pipeline for opportunities to buy in this location is likely to dry up. We are likely to see fewer properties come to the market because people now think that by holding their asset, that asset's likely to increase in value because that demand that comes into the market is likely to, drive prices up for the limited supply that already exists. So it's an interesting area, and we've certainly been able to position some of our investor clients in this market in recent years that they really will capitalise on this opportunity that now exists before them.
And if you look at the areas around Hurston, obviously there's Kelvin Grove. Across the river, across the creek, you then jump into Wilston, the park pocket of Wilston, just near that Newmarket. Obviously, you're picking up areas of Windsor, so very close proximity to that area where you can actually walk straight across. There's bridges that go across there. You can get really good access to be able to get up towards that Hurston area where the hospital is and where now Victoria Park will be. If we continue across that inner city bypass where I mentioned the National Aquatic Centre will be, you're touching on Spring Hill there.
Yeah. The city is a city fringe location where typically there's fewer houses and more multi-unit dwellings in that location.
Some of the houses in that area are the terrace houses.
That's right.
So older. That's where Terrace School is, Gregory Terrace School. So you do pick up some of those terrace houses, but again, you do have a bit more units scattered in the area because you are close to the city side of it. Head out towards the east slightly, and then you're heading down towards your showground area, which we'll touch again on because that's an area that is going to be upgraded. So we've got some areas that are getting upgraded, and then we've got some new venues. One area they did decided not to go ahead with was Brisbane Live. So Brisbane Live was going to be a arena, an entertainment precinct arena, and that was going to be across the top of Roma Street. They've decided not to go ahead with that. And they're looking to do something more in the future, maybe over towards the Gabba area. But again, that's probably going to be public sector that will entertain that side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is important to note that there were a few changes from what the original plan for these venues was. So Brisbane Arena was to be built and a drop-in pool was to be used for the swimming at that time when the Olympic Games were being held. Now, that's no longer going ahead, as Scott's pointed out. So instead, there's obviously the use and the upgrade of the Brisbane Exhibition Grounds. Now, for those that are not familiar with Brisbane, the Brisbane Exhibition Grounds just sit to the east of the Victorian Park area within walking distance. So this seems like a common sense approach to have all of these precincts linked by pedestrian access. Now, not only the Victoria Park precinct, but also the RNA or the ECA precinct, if you like, the Brisbane Showground precinct, they are currently serviced by train. There is a train station that runs straight through the RNA Showgrounds, so there is train access. There is also the Brisbane Metro that runs through to Hurston and the Brisbane Busway that also runs through to Hurston. So these precincts are also very accessible when it comes to public transport access. So thinking about the movement of people that needs to exist in the future, not only will we have venues that are linked really well through pedestrian access, but we will also have these venues linked to our train network, our bus network, and also the Brisbane Metro network. So it sort of makes sense that all of these venues are centralised in one location.
So the showgrounds, ECA, as we know them, the RNA showgrounds, obviously there's going to be an upgrade there. So they'll upgrade the existing facilities, 20,000 seat capacity, which obviously hosts multiple events even through the year. So we've not just got the ECA, but they'll do car and travel shows for the camping caravans and all those types of things. There's events in there. They hold concerts in there. It's actually used quite a lot at the moment as it is. So the old Machinery Hill, those that have been to the ECA and know the ECA well, the old Machinery Hill to be upgraded and all those sort of areas. So as Melinda mentioned, great public transport access to it. You can walk. You've got the hospital across the road and all the public transport in and around the area. So look, the upgrade for the showgrounds, I think that's fantastic for the showgrounds to get a bit of an upgrade. And they have got a lot of facilities in that area as well, indoor arenas and that just around the showground area.
I will say the land zoning in and around the precinct around Brisbane Showgrounds, there is a lot of high density zoning. We have seen a lot of that area transform over the last 8 to 10 years, and we've seen a lot of high density unit development come through, especially in the King Street precinct, which is just off the ECA Showgrounds area. as I've mentioned before, this is walking distance to where the main stadium and the aquatic centre will be located, and it's going to be accessible by public transport. We will talk a little bit later about where the athletes' villages are located, but again, walking distance from this precinct is where they're going to be building more high-density units to accommodate the athletes' village or one of the athletes' villages that will accommodate or house the athletes during the Olympic Games event.
Interesting in this area, and I'll just throw this one, and when you talked about the high density, just down the road from the showgrounds, near the Valley Pool, there's the Fortitude Valley School. So I think it was our first
Vertical school.
So it's actually the first that they've had here in Brisbane, vertical school where they've gone up, very little sort of grounds. There's a little bit of an outdoor area there, but yeah, the school's built up, and it was one of the first ones to happen here in Brisbane, and that's right near the showgrounds area. The other location is obviously the Queensland Tennis Centre over at your Tennyson, just on the south side. So there's an existing tennis centre there. There's going to be an upgrade to that facility, 12 new courts and a new 3,000-seat show court in the area.
That's right. So this is an area that is impacted by flood. There are a lot of low-density homes nearby, and it is serviced by the train line as well. So in and around Tennyson, nearby in other suburbs, Woolloongabba, Fairfield, etc., you will have a sprinkling of low to medium density residential housing, but at this stage, there's only very small pockets of higher density housing in and around Tennyson. It will be interesting to see if that changes off the back of any upgrades to the council planning scheme between now and 2032 to accommodate more people in those precincts and in those regions. But time will tell. But Tennyson on the south side of Brisbane also earmarked for a lot of infrastructure upgrades there.
And as you mentioned, public transport, access by a train. So this is really important with all these venues as well. The Gabba obviously has been the home for the cricket, for the AFL for quite a while now. They're going to use it for the Olympic Games, obviously up until the Olympics and then during the Olympic Games. Obviously then after that, basically what they've proposed is they will demolish the Gabba. So that will be the farewell to the Gabba, and then there's talk about an entertainment precinct there, but I believe the funding will come from the public sector, and that's thrown out to that area there. Access again from public transport. They've got the Cross River Rail that just come into that area, so it will have access for public transport in and out. A little bit more high rise in that area as well, high density in around the Woolloongabba precinct area.
And it is interesting because many years ago, what was it, 3 years ago, when our former Labor government announced the Gabba upgrade being the location for the main Olympics venue, some investors actually went mad and bought properties in and around the Gabba precinct. I guess there's a lesson in understanding until there's certainty around infrastructure, it's wise to hold off and make your investment decisions once things are finalised and funded. We know there's a lot of plans in place for the development of Brisbane infrastructure, but when we are advising clients in terms of investment opportunities, we're not making speculative decisions off the back of a what-if scenario. We need to wait for certainty before we actually make recommendations on a particular location that might benefit from infrastructure that may be coming in the future. And I think that's, something that people need to be aware of. Just because something's talked about doesn't mean to say that it is in the pipeline and funded and definitely going to happen, because it still could be decades away.
Obviously, there's some regional venues. We'll just skip through these pretty quick, obviously, because we're talking Brisbane-wise. But you've got the Gold Coast, you've got the Sunshine Coast, Rockhampton and Whitsundays and the Townsville area. When we talked about, you mentioned the Athletes Village, I think, earlier on. So right near the showground in the Bowen Hills area there near King Street, you've got where proposed the Athletes Village will be in Brisbane. Obviously, there'll be other athletes' villages, Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, etc. But this area in around the main village will be housing 10,000 plus Olympians and officials, and then that will be turned into housing post-Olympics.
So from an investment perspective, for those that are investing in a similar product type right now, there will be potentially 10,000 new dwellings coming over the next 7 years, that people need to be aware of. How is that going to impact the property values for the product type that I'm buying right now? If we're looking at something high density, for example, already in Bowen Hills or Spring Hill or areas in and around that region, will this impact my property value when a further 10,000 come to the market potentially after the Olympic Games are complete and they're no longer needed for athlete requirements? Definitely important for investors to keep that in mind.
We do have to keep saying Olympics and Paralympics.
We do.
I know Melinda was actually attended the Paralympic Games as an official.
I did back in the year 2000 in Sydney, and as an athlete liaison officer, I spent time in the athletes' village with the Australian Paralympic team, and boy, that was an experience that I will never forget. So, having been a part of an event like this in the past makes me really excited because I know how much excitement comes from being part of an Olympic Games, or in this case, a Paralympic Games. But our job always is to now help investors understand, what's the benefit to them of some of these big announcements, and how can we capitalize on opportunities that might exist between now and then and well beyond for our clients.
Yeah, whether it's the Olympics or the Paralympics, they're all quite inspiring and quite amazing as well. Just very quickly, infrastructure, legacy projects, obviously Cross River Rail. So when we're talking about bigger public transport sort of setups, obviously we've got the Cross River Rail. It's underway. It's under construction. Should be ready by about 2029, thereabouts, we hope. And
we've talked about this in the past, but I do want to say again, what this will do for the Brisbane train network, it will open up our network. At the moment, there is a gridlock because all of the trains come into and out of the CBD through 3 critical stations. There is no grid as such, so our train network is limited in terms of the frequency of services by the volume of trains that come into and out of the CBD. Once the Cross River Rail is in effect, it redirects trains coming into and out of the CBD through a different corridor. And what that means is it opens up the grid, it opens up the network, and it enables more frequent services across all train lines throughout the city. So this will improve the potential movement of people, which is going to become critical at a time when we're hosting the Olympic Games, but also well beyond as Brisbane continues to grow as a capital city and we continue to see this influx of people from both interstate and international migration.
And obviously the Brisbane Metro high-frequency bus system, it's open, but there are extensions happening on that. So there will be extra extensions compared to what we've got at the moment, and that will continue to obviously operate through there. And then you've got the link to the Sunshine Coast. It's supposed to be ready for 2032.
Train link, that is, which has huge benefits to the northern corridor of Brisbane, obviously having frequent services to and from the Sunshine Coast. Look, at this stage, it's not been announced that it's going to be a fast train, but any type of existing train network that goes all the way through to Maroochydore, because at the moment it is inland only to the likes of Nambour, and you really can't get out to the coastal regions. So that's a big benefit to those that live on the Sunshine Coast and commute and are looking for other public transport options. But equally, it's great for those of us that live here in Brisbane that want to get away on the weekend to the beach, but don't necessarily want to sit in the traffic that exists when you head up the Gympie Highway towards the Sunshine Coast.
Excellent. So that's a little bit of an idea of what's going to happen. It's exciting times. Look, we'll bring you more information as we get more information, as things start to happen. It is exciting for Brisbane. We're really looking forward to it.
Yeah.
It's going to be great.
The big thing I'll be looking out for is any changes to planning schemes that permits, higher density developments in and around this region. At this stage, we're not seeing anything in that space, but that's something that we will be keeping an eye out, because that can also impact on, the supply of properties in certain areas. But we'll definitely keep you updated. It is an exciting time for Brisbane. We now have a plan in place, and we're now looking forward to seeing how that all unfolds in the years ahead.
And the other thing we'll keep an eye on is transport and proposed transport corridors. So there's a northern corridor that's also been proposed. So there's lots of little bits of moving pieces. And obviously, as things start developing that infrastructure, we'll aim to keep everyone updated on how Brisbane's changing as well moving forward in the future. So hopefully that's, again, been great information for everyone. It's been nice chatting. And as I always do, I'll let Melinda wrap things up and say goodbye. So from myself, thanks very much for listening again, and take care and bye for now.
Thanks once again for joining us on the Brisbane Property Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this special Olympic infrastructure update, helping you understand what is the likely impact around those surrounding regions. If you have enjoyed this episode, please share with friends and family. We would love for you to leave us a review on your favourite podcast player. And please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. We look forward to speaking with you again next week. Until then, bye for now.